What's going on, guys? This is the Football Fanatics here, and we're going to be going over the breaking news that happened yesterday. A ton of stuff happened. Zeke got suspended. 2 major trades went down. 1 kicker got cut, who we all knew should have been cut probably last year.
Yep.
We're actually going to jump right into things, actually. We're going to go to the Zeke suspension, a huge hit to the league, huge hit to the Cowboys. I'm going to go to James first. How do you feel on the Zeke suspension?
I mean, there was a little bit of evidence pointing to that he did it, but it was like there wasn't so much to really hand out a 6-game suspension like that. It's really going to hurt the Cowboys' chances this year. I mean, after coming off, the number 1 seed in the NFC, I mean, those 6 games, they're going to struggle to move the ball. I mean, Dak's you're going to really see what he's made of this year because he's going to have to supply most of the offense early on.
Yeah, they do versus some hard teams in that stretch. Denver, the Cardinals, the Packers, the Giants,
49ers.
just to name a few. 49ers, just to name a few. I mean, 49ers aren't that hard, but... Go to Buck next on the Zeke.
You know, I got some stats here that I look at from Ezekiel Elliott, and you can say, all right, I'll go through the stats, but he had 15 touchdowns last year, 1,631 yards. To me, 5.1 yards per carry on 322 attempts. That, to me, is incredible, and you can say that's the offensive line. You can say Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris could do the same under that offensive line, whatever. But Ezekiel Elliott, he did so much more than just what the offensive line could do and help him with. You saw what he was able to do past the offensive line on his own. Of course, the holes are made by the offensive line, but he was very crafty outside of that, and he's a very good running back, and I can't say that's the same with Alfred Morris. I mean, the old Alfred Morris, perhaps, but, I mean, the Alfred Morris, what happened to him? I don't know what happened to him. It's not like he gained weight or anything. It's just he doesn't seem to be the same Redskins Alfred Morris he was. And Darren McFadden, yeah, he did all right 2 years ago. Didn't play much last year due to an injury and whatnot. Not that he'd play much anyways, but now with Ezekiel Elliott going down, I don't really know what to expect from him. Is he the same player he was 2 years ago who had a decent season? But Ezekiel is definitely a big loss. But I'd like to see him get away from all the distractions and just play football.
Yeah, so McFadden, I believe, in my own opinion, will be serviceable enough for them to win a few games. I don't think that, yes, Zeke, he's probably top 3 running back in this league. Debatably, you could probably debate LaShawn and DeMarco Murray and Melvin Gordon, but to me, he's probably top 3. And Darren McFadden, yes, that's a big downgrade, but this O-line's good. I believe Dak's actually a better quarterback than people give him credit for. This wide receiving group's actually kind of decent, so I believe that, unlike James said, where they won't be able to move the ball, I think they can probably service up probably 3 or 4 wins in that stretch. One of the things I want to get to is Zeke's side already said that they were going to appeal this and that they would possibly bring it to court like Brady did. If that happens, this suspension can't go into effect until that's all over. So this suspension could get pushed back even longer. And to the point that scares me is that if this thing does go to court and say it ends halfway through the season, or it ends near the end of the season, then that's when his 6 games going to the suspensions happens. That's the end of the year when you need him. Or if it happens next year, it's scary to think about that the suspension might not just happen in the first 6 games, but if he pushes this thing back or it happens next year, it can affect the team even long term.
I almost think it'll go positively for him. I've read a lot of stuff about, they do have some evidence, but not enough. I think that what they're saying right now is that it could be going down to 4 games. But again, these are just rumors and whatnot. You can never say until the actual verdict is chosen.
Another thing I want to say is I read a piece on Zeke, and the fact is that a lot of the judgment that was passed on him was off of facts that weren't really dead set facts. They were more going on her side of the story than his. Just because it's a big star, they felt like they probably had to bring discipline down on him. They didn't like how it looked on the league. To me, I wish that they would have looked at his side of the story more. They in this article, they showed his side of the story. He's never been arrested. He's never had any anything on him. They've never gotten anything on him. All of the hospital reports, there's really nothing there. It's just basically her story versus his story, and they went with her story, and he got suspended 6 games. I think that's way too much. 6 games is way too much.
Well, I think they gave him such a long suspension because of the bar incident, too.
Yeah.
Where he reportedly punched a guy in
So
the
you
face.
think they kind of added it all together?
Yep.
He also had a DUI a couple months ago too. So
I don't think when I talk about Ezekiel Elliott and the distractions, I don't necessarily think of him as a criminal, like a Aaron Hernandez kind of criminal or a Ray Rice criminal. I know he kind of has the same kind of Ray Rice thing, but I more think of him as a young, kind of dumb, young player where he's just all the off-field issues is kind of, and you kind of hope he will mature over time on that. But I don't necessarily think of him as a criminal. It's more of the just dumb decisions he makes off-field.
Yeah. So, in my own opinion, I believe that he shouldn't have been suspended as long as he was. I don't believe he should have been suspended at all. I think there wasn't enough evidence there to suspend him.
Yeah.
I think they did it just because of how many things he had against him. He had the DUI, he had the bar fight, and I think it was just like it looked bad on the league, so they felt like they had to do something. I felt like they did too much.
Mm-hmm.
Stanley, how do you feel?
I think 6 games is too much. I mean, this is his first offense. So, I mean, usually your first offense isn't that bad. I mean, if he hasn't, been doing it nonstop, he doesn't go out there and purposely do it. So, I mean, 4 games would be even too high. I would say, 1 to 2. Because, I mean, there's people out there who kill people and get away with it and still play in the league. Well, not anymore. He doesn't play in the league anymore, I should say. But it's just...
Talking about the Ravens player?
He's talking about Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis.
And you could say the same thing about Hernandez, too.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, if he brings it to the core, I feel like it would hurt the Cowboys more. Like you said, it could end near that playoffs when they're rolling and he loses. Say he goes to 6 games, he loses the 6 games. The Cowboys lose their season because of that. Because Zeke is, I think McFadden's good, but Ezekiel, I feel like he's just better. He's more elusive. He's got speed and he's about the same strength. So I feel like losing Zeke will hurt that offense more than McFadden would do for the offense.
And I think that we can all agree on that it's too much, but at the same time, you hope something comes away from this. You hope that he kind of learns his lesson, and if they go 2-4, let's say, you hope he kind of understands he can't do that again, because if they go 2-4 or 1-5, which I don't think they will, but if they did, he kind of knows the blame is going straight to him.
Again, I do think that they have a high chance of winning a few games during this stretch. McFadden is serviceable, but yes, he does need to learn a lesson. He needs to know that these off-field antics just can't happen. Mostly when you're a star of a team. You're basically the face of a franchise with Dak, but he's probably the more face of that franchise. He's got to put that team on his back, and he can't do that stuff. But we're going to move on here to the other breaking news that happened. The 2 trades that went down. Bills made 2 blockbuster trades, getting rid of Sammy Watkins to the Rams. I'm going to go Buck first. How do you feel on this?
Yeah, so the trade itself was Sammy Watkins and a 2018 6th-round pick to the Rams. And the Bills got E.J. Gaines and a 2018 2nd-round pick. To me, the better part of this deal was the 2nd-round pick. E.J. Gaines, he's not much. And the Rams, they brought in Nickel Roby-Coleman to kind of fill that same role as E.J. Gaines. So I definitely think the Rams won this trade, but when we get over to the Eagles... in Bill's trade, I'll talk about the Bills winning that trade to me. But this trade specifically, I was not a big fan of it for the Bills side of it. I thought that Sammy Watkins, although he didn't play great last year, he had limited play, 28 receptions, 430 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You compare that to the 2015 season, and you kind of had high expectations this past year, and he didn't live up to that, and he's always been injured, but... Man, Jared Goff, he needs weapons. You give him a good weapon. You bring in a 6th-round pick. Not much there. But you got rid of E.J. Gaines, who to me you didn't need anymore. You have Tremaine Johnson, Nickel Roby-Coleman, okay? So, E.J. Gaines was kind of the odd man out here. So, and you bring in a really good wide receiver. I've got the Rams winning this trade.
All right, I'll go next. I like it for both sides. I think the Rams needed the wide receiver. They got a good wide receiver in Sammy Watkins. If he can stay healthy, he does have that ankle issue. He had a foot injury. So, I mean, if he can stay healthy, he's a good wide receiver for them. Again, like you said, he had a great 2015, little injury riddled season last season, but he still did kind of decent. So if he can stay healthy, he'll help the Rams. I think the big part for the Bills in this was they saw that 2nd-round pick. That gives them 2 2nd-round picks next year. They also have 2 firsts, and from the Eagles trade, they now have 2 thirds.
Yeah.
So that is a fantastic draft for next year. That just sets them up. So I think that's kind of what they saw in this. E.J. Gaines, I think, could be a nice piece to that Bills defense. Yes, he was the odd man out on the Rams, I think he comes in here now, and he's like a starter for that team, and he's actually a decent cornerback in my own opinion. I think he's pretty good in man-to-man coverage, which is what the Bills usually like to run. Usually under Sean McDermott, he likes to run man-to-man. So I like that.
The only thing I had with this was, like, obviously the Bills seem to be competitive every year. Not, like, playoff competitive, but, like a 7-9, 6-10 playoffs, 6-10 competitors kind of. And you're obviously trying, but, I mean, even with that, you're obviously trying to rebuild with some younger talent. I would have rather seen them trade someone like a Jerry Hughes or Kyle Williams or maybe even LaShawn McCoy's getting older, who only has maybe 2-3 really good years left in him. Whereas for Sammy Watkins, to me, I think he could have 7 or 8 more good years, okay? He's just that young, and if you're trying to build young, you need building blocks. And Sammy Watkins, to me, in this rebuild, I wouldn't say full-on rebuild, but there's somewhat rebuilding. I think Sammy Watkins should have been a part of that and as a building block. But
I think one of the big parts about this deal was that Sammy Watkins' last year was contract, so they got rid of him due to that. But again, I think the fact that maybe the Bills didn't take into comprehend was that the Rams have already said they want a contract extension with Sammy Watkins, and I think that probably will get done. They want to extend him. They said this isn't just a 1 year, we'll take him, you get our second. They want him for a while, and I think it will end up getting done. But I do like that the Bills got a second. I like that the Bills got E.J. Gaines. I think it was a win-win on both sides. James, how do you feel?
I'm going to start off with the Rams, and, I mean, you look at, they got a 6th-round pick. I mean, more picks get more young talent. I mean, maybe that turns into something one day. Maybe it doesn't, so whatever. And so, I have the Rams. That's a great trade for them, but Sammy Watkins also loses on that trade. I'll start off. The Rams win. I mean, Jared Goff's young. They did get rid of Kenny Britt and Brian Quick, so they brought in a solid young target to pair with Goff. But Sammy Watkins loses in this situation because he goes from the AFC, they don't have a lot of great cornerbacks. I mean, he played the Jets, who were in rebuilding mode. They don't have Revis anymore. They played the Dolphins, who have Byron Maxwell as their best corner. And now he goes to the NFC West, where he has to face Patrick Peterson and Richard Sherman twice a year. So I look at that, and he's going to have a lot tougher time, especially if he's hurt, trying to produce. And if he signs a contract extension with the Rams, I mean, hey, that's cool. But then I look at the Bills side of it. E.J. Gaines is a solid corner. He'll compete for that number 2 role behind Tre'Davious White. I mean, they brought in Sharice Wright, who's like a journeyman.
Terrible.
He's been around the league for a while. And the 2nd-round pick, and I don't think the Rams will be too successful. That'll almost be like 3 first-round picks. So I really like it. For both sides would win that trade. So
Stanley, how do you feel on it?
I think the Rams got the worst of it because they gave up a good pick, and Sammy Watkins is always injured. Why bring in someone that's always injury riddled, and get rid of a cornerback who could have played number 3? It's always good to have a solid cornerback crew, and they got rid of E.J. Gaines and brought in the Bills, who lost Stephon Gilmore. So I mean, he fills that role kind of, but it's not. He has to fill those shoes, which is gonna be hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the Bills won that. They got rid of an injury prone, and they brought in salary cap. So I feel like they won that, but at the same time, they lost it because of the fact that they got rid of their wide receivers, and they got Anquan, but they lost Sammy Watkins, but he never really played because he was injured.
Well, Sammy Watkins, he has missed 11 games in his entire career, out of 48 possible games he has played in. That's not including games where he went out due to injury, but he started.
I mean, the only full season he's played was his rookie year.
Yeah. So, yeah, he has had some injury problems. Again, the foot issue was a problem for a while. They didn't know if they wanted to have surgery on it. They didn't know if they wanted to put like a screw into it. He said it's always like hurting him. It seemed to go down last year, and then he got an ankle injury. Cost him a lot of his season. He only played 8 games, so... I mean, we'll move on to the next one.
Well, one last thing on that one.
Yeah, actually, I want to add something too.
Yeah, you want to go first? Or?
No, go ahead.
All right, so to me, if the Rams lose Sammy Watkins this offseason, I would turn it to the Bills, saying they won this trade. Because the Rams, to me, if they lose Sammy Watkins, it's really a 1-year rental, and you're not going to compete for the playoffs this year, no offense, but... I mean, if it was the Packers or the Patriots, I'm going to say Packers, if it was the Packers and they had done this, I wouldn't change my mind. They still would have won this trade because they're actually in legit competition. Whereas the Rams, if they have Sammy Watkins for 1 year without really competing and lose him, they go right back to where they were, and they gave up EJ Gaines and a second-round pick, so they right back to where they were and even worse.
But looking at like the Bills side of it, like yes, you did get rid of Watkins. He has shown some like talent. I mean, LaShawn McCoy even said when he was talking about like the trade, because the one when they got Jordan Matthews too, he said you could easily tell who the better player was, obviously referring to Watkins. But the biggest thing for them is why they got rid of him is, well, there's two reasons actually. One, he played 8 games last year, and the Bills were actually in playoff contention for a while. They started off 5-2. They were 5-2 at one point, and then he goes down, and they lose a lot of close games to teams like Seattle and stuff like that. I mean, it really hurt their playoff chances. And then that draft where he got picked, that was one of the worst moves in NFL history, honestly. They give up 2 first-round picks and take Sammy Watkins and pass up on players like Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, it was just it was like a forgive and forget, honestly. Just try to get rid of him.
I do agree with you, Buck, that if it's a rental, the Rams easily lose this. They need to get that contract extension done. I've never been a big fan on Watkins. The thing that turned the tables for me on Watkins was when I went to go to a Chargers-Bills game, and I was watching the game, and on plays he wasn't getting the ball, or he knew he wouldn't get the ball, he was walking. On run plays, he wasn't blocking. If you watch him, he just seems like a kind of lazy player sometimes. There's times where, yes, he's a competitive player, he wants it, he wants the ball more than others, and he makes a spectacular play. But there's just other times that he's just lazy. And you don't want that from a number 1 wide receiver. So to me, it was just like, I never really liked him that much. But I feel like maybe a new scenery out in L.A., Jared Goff, maybe with the help of Todd Gurley, maybe they become a trio. You never know. But we're going to move on to the next one, the replacement of Sammy Watkins. They get Jordan Matthews and a third from the Eagles for Darby. Buck, how do you feel on this one?
Yeah, so you just said the trade, and to me, we talked about it before. I mean, we didn't really talk about it, we mentioned it. They've got 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, okay? 2 picks in the first round, 2 picks in the second round, 2 picks in the third round, okay? So that, to me, is good, okay? And you gave up Ronald Darby to get Jordan Matthews. Now, you got EJ Gaines, okay? You can afford to give up Ronald Darby, who, to me, wasn't as impressive last year as he was in his rookie year. He kind of seemed, lower than expected to in his second season, and that was with Stephon Gilmore still there as a number 1, so I don't know how he would transition as from number 2 to the number 1 corner. And you get rid of him, and you bring in Jordan Matthews and a third-round pick. So the third-round pick adds to your draft picks, and that's a very good value. And so is Jordan Matthews, who you just traded Sammy Watkins away. You get yourself a new number 1. And Jordan Matthews last year, again, a guy who, did better the year before. In 2015, had 85 receptions, 997 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Last year, 73 receptions, 804 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. So he goes 5 touchdowns less there. He didn't even hit 900 yards like he did the year before, and then 12 less receptions last year. So the production went down, and, Carson Wentz, you could say, was a big part of it and whatnot, but, I don't think that'll get much better with Tyrod Taylor. That's just my opinion on that.
All right, I'm going to go next. I love this trade on both sides again.
I love it too, yeah.
Both trades, I liked both sides of it. The reason I like it for the Bills is because they basically got a cheaper Sammy Watkins, and they get a third-round pick. It was a win-win for them. I'm just going to read off stats right here. Jordan Matthews, 872 yards, 8 touchdowns in 10 games. 997 yards, 8 touchdowns in 13 games, and 804 and 3 touchdowns in 13 games. That's his career stats. Sammy Watkins, 430 yards, 2 touchdowns, 8 games. 1,047 yards, 9 touchdowns, 13 games. 982 yards, 6 touchdowns in 16 games. They sound pretty similar. They're pretty similar wide receivers in stats, like stat-wise. So basically, you just got a cheaper Watkins. Plus, you add on that third round. Now you have 2 picks throughout the first 3 rounds. I believe this year, the Bills, they're going to compete for the playoffs. They probably won't make it, but that next year, this year after, the year after this one, Bills fans should be so excited for. they are going to be a team that wreaks havoc, I believe. If they draft well this next year, which they have a high probability of doing, this team's going to be good. The Eagles, I love getting Darby for them because, again, next year when you have Sidney Jones and Darby as your 1-2 punch.
And you finally got Nolan Carroll back out.
Yeah. You have a 1-2 punch at corners. You already have a decent front seven. That defense starts looking pretty freaking good. And it helps out a lot this year when your number one this year was going to be basically Patrick Robinson and some other no-names. Jalen Mills. I mean, that helps out a lot getting Darby there. 'Cause Darby had a down year last year, but he was still serviceable. He was still pretty good. Better than Patrick Robinson and Jalen Mills was. So I like both sides of this deal. I think, again, both sides won. James, how do you feel on it?
I think it was solid for both sides. I mean, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, secondary was a huge weakness. I mean, they got an inconsistent but very talented player in Ronald Darby. I mean, maybe Malcolm Jenkins can help tutor him a little bit. And like you were saying, with him and Sidney Jones, that's going to be one hell of a duo later on. And the Bills, I mean, yeah, you filled a need. You replaced Watkins with Jordan Matthews. I mean, that's all right. But the biggest thing for me is the stashing up the draft picks. I mean, you look at that. I mean, they probably came to a realization they're not going to win the division or even make the wild card as long as Tom Brady's there. So why not build up for the future? And when Tom Brady eventually retires,
possible, but
it's the AFC. They're still tough. I mean, there's a lot of good teams, but build up for the future. And then if Tyrod can do something this year, you sign him to a long-term deal. You have one hell of a team.
Again, as I was saying, this next year for them, I don't think this year they'll make the playoffs, but next year with those 6 top-tier picks, plus the team they have now, if they can sign maybe a few free agents, re-sign good players, this team is going to be easily a wild card team. And I don't know if I would say competing with the Patriots for the division, but they could easily be a 9-7, 10-6 team. We'll go to Stanley. How do you feel on this trade?
I think both sides did good. I mean, if you look at it, Darby did good, but not last year he did all right. But he goes to a different team. He has to show them what he's about. So he's going to help the Eagles out. And Matthews, I feel like he's a stronger Watkins. He's able to take hits and get up and hold the ball. While Watkins, he'd really just be scared to get hit because he's injured. But I feel like the picks would help, but unless they trade him away to try going higher in the draft, and they pull off another move with Watkins, like a Watkins move, and hopefully they don't, that they just stick with the 6 they have and just choose what they got now, unless they can get another first round and move up in the draft. So they just keep 2 and just get rid of a first round, maybe lose someone and gain someone and draft pick.
And as for a bolder prediction here, I could see Jordan Matthews having a better year this year than Sammy Watkins over in the Rams.
Well, definitely, yeah, because, I mean, Tyrod is definitely better than Goff. And, I mean, you have a running game in Buffalo that's actually good, so, I mean, that takes pressure off the quarterback. Yeah. So, yeah, I could definitely see that, too.
Yeah, I could also see that. Watkins is probably in the worser position than Matthews. Matthews has probably the more set-up chance to be better. I think Watkins is probably the better receiver when both healthy.
Yeah.
Like definitely. But in a better offense, Matthews has the better chance. The only way I could see Watkins being better than Matthews this year was that Goff treats him like Jameis Winston treats Mike Evans, where it's just like he force feeds him targets each game, where the volume ends up bringing up his stats. I mean, not to say, because Mike Evans is amazing. He doesn't need the volume. He just gets the volume and is good. But Watkins, I feel like that's the only way he will be anywhere that good this year is if he got a whole volume of targets and just had 10 receptions per game. But
in that wide receiver class, 10 years from now, you're going to look back and say that's one of the best wide receiver classes ever.
I mean, look at Allen Robinson went 2nd round. I mean,
Brandon Cooks, Odell, Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins. That draft is amazing.
Jarvis Landry.
All right, so we're going to go on to our last bit of breaking news, and it's news that I've expected for a while. Roberto Aguayo has been waived by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2nd-round pick from a year ago. I thought they were insane when they drafted him. That high, I didn't think he was.
They traded up too, didn't they?
Yeah, they traded up to get him. He wasn't. To me, when I saw him in college, he wasn't anything special. To me, them trading up to get him, I was like, wow, they just must have a very, very desperate need for a kicker, or just The GM got bet into it, double dog dared, and he was like, why not screw it? But finally got waived. Nick Folk and him, they were kind of competing in last night's preseason game. And Cincy, Aguayo missed an extra point and missed a field goal. Folk, he also missed a field goal, but, they must have seen something in Folk. Buck, how do you feel on this?
Well, Folk, he's been around longer. You've seen what he could do throughout his career. To me, I disagree with the timing. I think you should have given them at least, both of them the whole preseason to see how the competition comes out and turns out to be. I don't think this is the end for Roberto Aguayo. I don't think he'll immediately go to another team. But last year we saw Josh Brown get suspended from the Giants, and we see kickers cut and signed all the time. I think another team will buy into this young kicker and say, hey, we can develop and train this guy. I'm not saying you can. I think he's pretty broken at this point. But a team might buy into the fact that he's young and he has potential somewhere there. And, I think they'll sign him if their kicker gets injured or suspended or whatnot. So not necessarily immediately right now. I don't see any team going out of the blue and just cutting their kicker and signing this guy. But if something happens and you urgently need a kicker, I would look to Roberto Aguayo. But again, this was much needed. They shouldn't have traded up for a kicker last year. Kickers come and go all the time. I don't believe in drafting a kicker in the second round. Maybe if it's a 7th or 6th round or something. You see punters go then, but for a kicker in the second round, I just don't believe in that.
A thing I've thought about is that not that teams usually have backup kickers, but a thing that would be awesome for Roberto Aguayo is if he went to something like the Colts and got to sit behind Adam Vinatieri, one of the best all time, and just got to learn behind him. Not that teams really ever do that. Most teams, their backup kicker is their punter. But if that was to happen at some point, that would be awesome for Roberto Aguayo. James, how do you feel on this?
Well, the Bucs, when they did that, they tried to pull off the Raiders. But, you look at Sebastian Janikowski, he's always been consistent throughout his career. Aguayo, I wasn't too upset with the pick when they made it because he was the most accurate kicker in college
and he had
football
production
history.
in college.
Yeah, his field goal percentage was almost 90%, which is insane for kicking. But do I think he'll get another shot? Yes, I will. Maybe that's what he needs, a change of scenery, like Buck was saying. He definitely has a talent where if he catches on somewhere else, he could definitely become one of the top kickers to ever play in the NFL. But that's if he can get his head straight and get back on track.
Go ahead.
Like you said, bring him if he goes to a team like a veteran kicker.
Yeah, that was a great point.
Even if it's the Cardinals with Phil Dawson or Raiders with Janikowski, any veteran kicker would help him out because he's young. He could be doing some reckless crap on the side now that he's cut, but he has money. But if you just bring him into an new environment, have him kick nonstop and get used to the environment, he could be productive. He could be signed the next few days because you never know. 49ers might sign him because Robbie Gould missed some field goals and all that. The Cardinals might sign him because Phil Dawson might have a heart attack or something. You never know. But, he's young, he's good, and he's got the power and accuracy to prove it.
And it seemed like last year, too, he started off very, very slow. He wasn't good in the beginning, but it seemed like, I remember in that Panthers game, he had the game-winning field goal, and, it seemed like he was picking it up, and I thought he was going to just burst off, but then he went kind of downhill in the preseason and training camp and whatnot. So, it's always iffy with him. But
another thing, from my point before, even if he doesn't go and sign with a team, like I was saying before, you have players like Terrell Pryor who goes and trains with Antonio Brown in the offseason. It'd be cool to go see or hear a report saying that Aguayo is doing that with Justin Tucker or an Adam Vinatieri or Phil Dawson. It'd be nice to see that even if he doesn't sign with a team this year or something like that, it'd be cool to see that he's still working on it and he's still going with these greats. Justin Tucker, he's not a great yet, but he will be. He's probably the best kicker in the NFL right now.
Yeah,
he will be one of the greats. It would be awesome for him to go and do that. I hope Aguayo gets another shot somewhere. He's a young guy. He has a good future in the NFL. He just got to He's got to slow down the game, I believe. I believe the game's too fast for him right now.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think if he's going to come back, I think it's going to be quietly and he's going to have to develop behind the scenes kind of thing. I think the pressure right now is on. Everyone's like, this guy was picked in the second round. He's traded up for, he had all this pressure to be great. And I think that pressure got to him to a point where he just wasn't himself. And, you hope he can come back, but it's probably going to be quietly where he's developing and all the hype's kind of calmed down a little bit.
That's another question that I had was that if Aguayo wasn't picked in the second round, what if he was picked in like the 6th, 7th, or undrafted? Do you think he would have had the same struggles? Doesn't have that pressure of the second round?
I almost wonder if he's a 6th, 7th pick, would he have even been cut,
Yeah, no, I think he would have been on the team. They would have.
Yeah.
He would have been like a project and maybe sent to like the practice squad rather than cut. But when you spend a second round pick on somebody, and they don't produce, and it's just you want to try to get rid of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, talking about that, Larry English on the Chargers, he was cut within 3 years, our first pick. I believe if you are a higher pick, you need to produce faster.
Yes.
And so, in my opinion, if Aguayo was like a 6th, 7th undrafted free agent, he probably wouldn't have had that pressure. Probably wouldn't have felt all the pressure. Probably would have been a better kicker, in my opinion. I feel like I agree with you. He needs to go behind the scenes, maybe take a year off, get the pressure off him, and then come back.
There's only a select few who you can say are great under pressure, Aaron Rodgers being one of them.
All right, well, that was our show. Hope you guys like and subscribe down below. Leave comments for any of us. If you have a show idea, if you have a question for one of us, anything.